of the issues that can come up is in our class, what happens if we try to get name or greet before we set name? So let's run this and give this a try. So I'm going to create a person. Oh wait, actually, yeah, let's do this. Let's change up our code in here. So we're going to create a person. And actually I'm going to make this init demo. So let's, just so we can preserve what we had before, let's copy all the code from the previous example and paste it in here. And we're not going to do this. We're just going to create person1. And then we're going to try to display person1's name. We're going to try to use the getName method, and then we're going to try to use greet. So notice that in this we are doing the instantiation. Then we're just looking directly at what's in the name initially, and then can we call getName and can we call greet. And we get an error. Attribute error, person object has no attribute name. So because we tried to access the name first before setting it, it creates an error. Let's try this. Let's comment this, or I'll just delete this one for now. Let's delete this and see if we can use getName. And again, we get an attribute error. You know, we can't call the getName method because it's trying to access self.name, and person object has no attribute name because we didn't set it yet. And same thing here. Let's try doing the greet, and we're going to get the same thing. We try to access name. Since we didn't set it, it's not there. Now, you know, one way we could handle that is we could put an if statement in here, you know, if not name, return, or something like that. You know, maybe we'd say if not self.name, and I'll have it, you know, return, and, you know, blah, you know, no name, you know, something like that. But that's kind of messy. What we can do is we can up here say name is equal to maybe unknown. And so we can initialize name. Now you notice that up here I don't use self.name. Inside of the functions, it's referred to as self.name. So why don't I need to use self.name here? Well, because self is a reference to the, you know, basically the scope of the class, if you want to think of it that way. And name is in the scope of the class. It's in this tab level. So I don't need to put self.name for self variables here. So let me try this one, and let's print person1.name and see what we get here. And we get unknown. So that's kind of nice because now I've initialized this attribute. If I don't call setName first, I can call getName and it will give me something decent. And so what I've done is I've set this to a safe value. The other thing we could do is let's try print person1.getName. And so now I'm calling the getName method directly in the print statement. That worked. And then I could say greet, because greet has a print statement inside of it. I don't say print greet. I just say greet. And actually I need to put also here person1.greet. And let's see what we get there. Hello world, my name is unknown. Okay, so we have so this is a way you can initialize the variables. So that works, but it's a little weird because everything here has self dot and there's a function. So it would be nice if this was done the same way as here. If this was also done. So sometimes what you can do is use an init method. So I'm going to call this one init method demo. And we'll copy this over into init method demo. And so maybe what we could do is, instead of doing this, what we could do is define, we'll make an init method, and we'll say self, and we'll say self.name is equal to unknown. Okay, so now this makes us nice and orderly. We've got this init method. There's a problem here, though. What's going to make this init method be called initially? Well, if we run this right now, we get an attribute error because, well, we didn't call init. So if we do this, then what we have to end up doing is say person1.init initially, and that kind of works. That definitely works, but it's kind of cumbersome to always have to call the init method. So we can do this with a special magic method name, and to do the initialization, we're going to make a new one, and we're going to call this constructor demo. And I'm going to copy this over and show how we can do this as a constructor. If we put double underscores here, so this is 2 underscore characters. So sometimes people, when they do this, it'll look like this. It has to be 2 underscore characters. What this does is, when we don't need to do this now. This double underscore tells Python, hey, when you create an object of this class, when you instantiate this class, do this initialization code first. And so now let's try that. And that worked. So let's put a stop point here and run in debug mode and see what happens. So I'm going to run with F5. Hit my Python file as my debugger, and let's see what happens. Let it spool up. So I put my stop point after all initialization is so that we can just, it's done all this. Now we're sitting here. Oh, it looks like we're above, so we'll step over one. Let's try that again. Looks like I put my stop point at the wrong location. Okay, so now here we are on this line, and I'm going to step, so here we are at the instantiation steps. Up till now, all this has done is just made a person object, but watch what happens when I step into, with F11, step into that function. It acts like a function call. In fact, if you think about it, this looks like a function call. But rather than going to a function that's called it person, or something, it goes to the init function. So when we do the instantiation, if we have a double underscore init method in our class, as soon as we instantiate it, it will run this. And we can see that what it's doing is it's going to initialize name to this value. So this is often called a constructor, because it makes our object, and we use it to initialize variable names that we want to be initialized to something safe, usually. So now I will step over, and we can see that person1.name has this starting value of unknown, and then if I continue running, it'll actually do all of these statements, and they'll work fine, even though I haven't called set name for initially, because at least it's been initialized to a safe value. So this is typical of how you would you would initialize an object. We can either write a class, without one, which sometimes that works fine, but it creates the danger that if someone calls one of these methods out of sequence, our class is going to break. We can initialize it just like that by setting, a class variable here. And note that the class variable name here is the same as self.name inside the function. You have to use self inside the function, though, because this is basically saying, hey, go find a thing at this level, outside in the object scope, not in the function scope. And then the preferred way is really, and then we could use a method and remember to call it, but we almost never do this. This is too painful. Really, the preferred method is using these double underscores to initialize all your variables. So any attributes you have that need to be initialized go in this double underscore init method. And that's how we do variable initialization in a class. Thank you.